Hey everybody, this is Shannon.
And Alexis.
And we're welcoming you back for another episode of Get Stiff.
Get Stiff is a podcast where we have conversations around grief, loss, and everything in between over cocktails. Each episode coincides with a themed cocktail, and we share the recipe with our listeners.
So today's cocktail is the key lime pie. It's a blend of rum and limeade. Will we love it? Will we hate it? We're going to find out together. So if you're ready, let's raise a glass. Take a sip. And let's get into it. I can get into that. Let's get into it.
That was really good.
It really was, right?
It's key lime pie.
Sweet. I had it a little honey and salt on the side just in case it was going to be too tart. A little honey to cut it. Ooh. That's lovely.
It's really
Sorry, guys.
really
I failed
good.
on the cocktail. Hopefully I don't lose points for that.
No, you don't. You don't.
But I brought my favorite cocktail. So
yeah, what do you have? Tell us what you have.
So it's like part family. Yeah, so it's called a prosecco spritz, and it's like, or no, limoncello spritz, and it's like this much limoncello, and then this much prosecco, and then a little soda water.
Ooh,
See, that sounds
fancy.
delicious. Got the little bubbles. That sounds delicious.
Yeah, it's refreshing.
So let me introduce you, Dr. Crisp. Today, our lovely guest is Dr. Courtney Crisp. She is a therapist who specializes in eating disorders and healing the relationship between people and their bodies. She's passionate about creating a space where people are free to love themselves and feel seen. Not only does Dr. Crisp have her own private practice, she's also leading disorder training for other mental health professionals. She's a public speaker, a mother, a wife, freelance writer, and literally is basically just that girl.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr.
Yes,
Crisp.
thank you
We're
for
so
joining
excited
us
to have you.
today.
Yeah. Oh, thank you guys for having me. Yeah.
So I think we just dive right on into it. We want to start with the basics. So I think the people want to know how you got into this line of work and how did you decide that, I mean, a lot of people want to become therapists generally, I think, because they want to help others. But how did you kind of end up in this sector of mental health? How did you end up here and why are you so passionate about it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, I would say, I think, most therapists become therapists because they want to help people. I would also venture to say most therapists become therapists because they've been through something themselves, mental health wise. And for me, I was always like an athlete growing up, and I just saw a lot of eating disorders growing up, like both in and out of sports. And I would say I also just grew up in an area and was in an environment where thinness was just very much desired and prized. There was a lot of pressure to be thin, and just walking through the world 6 foot and just built pretty athletically. Even at my thinnest, I was just not that ideal, right? So I feel like from an early age, I had to learn how to challenge those societal standards. This is going to be fun with cocktails. I'm not used to talking about this.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah, that makes
this
it
is how we
spicy.
get down.
Yeah, so that's basically how I got into wanting to work with eating disorders. Just seeing how harmful those societal standards could be, and but also being an athlete, I would say I did have in some ways a healthy relationship with movement in my body, because I was I was trying to get better at my sport, and I saw my body as I wanted to get stronger, right, for my sport. So I think there was pros and cons with that. Yeah.
I've heard that a few times with athletes, how they say their body is like a tool. It's this is my job. My body is my job. Just how if you are if you're a doctor, you're consistently practicing medicine, right? So you're consistently going to learn more because medicine's always evolving. I think it's the same with athletes in a sense, where it's you're constantly having to work on yourself to keep yourself at your peak, because if you don't, the muscles will atrophy, or you may be more prone to injury and whatnot. So I think that's definitely a sentiment I've heard echoed before. But yeah, 6 feet tall.
And don't get me wrong, like yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, for some people, I think like sports and athletics like can be like a source of eating disorders too, and like certain sports are more like high risk for eating disorders. So that's definitely a factor too. But I think for me, sports were always like a source of a positive relationship with my body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting. And then you mentioned like societal pressure and things. And speaking about society, we know pretty much that society as a whole is pretty bad about supporting people when they're in multiple things, but specifically when people are grieving. So one of the things that we notice people tend to do, however, when people are grieving is either to like they have good intentions. So they'll bring or they'll send somebody food when they're grieving. But how can someone who is struggling with an eating disorder navigate through these gestures, and handle that? Like, what would be your advice about that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think everybody's really different. And I think in times of like stress, like grief would be, it's like everybody's going to respond differently, right? So if you struggle with binge eating, the impulse might be to like eat more, right? Or eat like more emotionally. Or if you struggle with like restricting and like not eating kind of makes you feel better, that might be the struggle, right? To not eat. Or if you struggle with like more like there's an eating disorder called ARFID, which is like very like excessive picky eating, where it's like you only like a few foods. And so it's like, so for people with ARFID, that could be really hard to just, get enough nutrition. So I think just knowing, I think just knowing it yourself and knowing kind of how you tend to respond when like you get hit with stress, and and kind of navigating it that way can be helpful. Cause I think that there's not like one size fits all answer for it, right? Because everybody responds really, really differently with different kinds of eating disorders.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know one thing I noticed about like my grief journey, not to make it about me, but one thing I noticed about my own grief journey is that people tend to comment on your appearance a lot as a way to try to make you feel better. And that was something I wasn't really prepared for. But like but you look great though. Like you look so good. It's like, thanks, I haven't eaten in 4 days because, I just don't have an appetite. And it's really, those comments get thrown around. And I think, like Alexa said, people have the best intentions and they mean well. But it was something that I just wasn't prepared for. And it was like, okay, that's all cool and fine. If I look great, I don't feel great. And do you think that comments like that during a tumultuous time can have an adverse effect on someone who is struggling?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I generally just don't love body comments in general because like you said, it's like you don't know what you're praising. And I think the tendency is to like, I think the societal tendency is to like praise people maybe when they've like lost weight, but it's like you don't know what you're praising. Like you said, like I hadn't eaten in 4 days, or you have people that are I don't know, they have cancer and they can't keep food down, right? Or I remember really early in my pregnancy, I had really bad nausea, and I like literally only like, I'm not even exaggerating, I could only eat like 2 foods for like 4 months, and everyone's like, "Oh, you look great," and I'm like, "Well, I can't eat anything," so it's like, it's not helpful. And then so I mean, that's kind of my general sentiment. I just don't love body comments in general. Like I know, so that's kind of how I feel about it. Yeah. I just think there's more interesting things to comment on. Yeah.
And it's so hard because people, I think that they mean well, like they mean it to be a compliment. But when you're already feeling so bad, and when you struggle with something like your appearance anyway, and then you have grief on top of that, and someone's like, "Oh, but you look great." It's like, okay, but if that was, I don't know if that was meant to be helpful, but like I'm kind of dying inside, so it's just this crazy thing that, society has put upon us that if someone is grieving, they're supposed to look like they're grieving. And when you don't look like you're grieving, here come the, oh, but you look so good comments, like I saw, has happened over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting, Shannon. So do you felt like they were trying to make you feel better? Like, well, at least
think
you
so.
Look good? Like,
I don't know. I think so. Or it's just like, I think people were trying to find, like, I noticed a lot, and that's kind of what really started me on I mean, I was in death care for years before Matt died, but I think what kind of started me on this path was I had never been on the other side. So with someone so close, I mean, I'd lost my grandparents or people who were older. In high school, we had a few friends that had passed away, but never like a partner. So it was interesting to see. It kind of felt like people, and not my immediate circle was great. Like my mom and my aunt came down, basically moved. Alexis basically moved in for like a month, and one of my other really good friends flew down from, like, even you, Courtney, you were definitely in my support circle and definitely helped, as we were planning the memorial, but just doing something that I call loving through action. And that's what kind of pushed me to speak more about it. 'Cause I think so many people focus on trying to soothe the person that's grieving, but really what you're doing is quieting their grief. You're silencing them. And because it makes you feel more comfortable. And so I kind of was trying to, even during, I think in our episode with Anita, Alexis, how people would come up to me at church when I would go back to church and would say things like, oh, well, everything happens for a reason. And so I would constantly counter that. Like, well, what was the reason? Because you're saying things just to say them. They don't, like, words mean things. In the words of Crystal from The Read, she says words mean things. And I think people tend to pump us full of these platitudes because they don't know what else to say. And so I think they were trying to, like, that's a very long way of saying I think they were trying to make me feel better. But I think there's a larger conversation to be had about what to say instead or when to say nothing. Because I think a lot of people feel the need to fill the silence because they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with like our own fucked up versions of what beauty standards are, and even society as a whole just has these crazy, especially for women, I would say, these crazy beauty standards. And I saw, Dr. Crisp, that you had written an article actually about how not to pass on our own fucked up versions of beauty standards onto our children. So I was just curious, when it pertains to grieving, especially with a child who is struggling already with that aspect of it, how can we support our children or children, that we have in our lives who may be struggling with eating while they are themselves grieving?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question.
That's a damn good question, Alexis. Where was that on the list? A damn good question.
Like,
so much. I have a lot of young siblings, so I think about it a lot, and a niece and a nephew. So I'm like, I just wonder, because a lot of parents struggle while they're grieving themselves and struggling to take care of themselves. And they have these children too, who also, they see their mom or their dad, not really eating. And then they also don't really feel the need to eat, or they want to eat, in abundance. So I just wonder, what you would suggest.
Well, I think of this as like, there's kind of like two categories. And one is like your kind of relationship with your body, and one's your relationship with food. And they're interlinked, but the advice is slightly different. So with the body stuff, I feel like, again, it's like the more you comment on your kids' bodies, the more you're teaching them to objectify themselves. And it's hard to have a really like good relationship with your body and a like empowered relationship with your body when you're like objectifying yourself, right? And you're looking at yourself through this lens of like, I'm not good enough, or I need to be thinner, I need to look a certain way, or I need to be whatever, right? So I think, again, it's like, it's really not great to like comment on kids' bodies in general. And also it's not great to comment on your own body in front of them. And again, this is like, it's easier said than done, but it's like when you comment on your body, like, oh my God, like I've gained so much weight, like I don't look good, like X, Y, and Z. It's like your kid hears that, right? And then your kid thinks, okay, well, what does that mean about my body, right? Like I'm related to you, I look like you.
Right.
So it's like, those messages definitely get passed down. And then I think with food, I find it helpful to really look at food, not in this like black and white way of like this food is like good or bad, right? But in looking at like how can I build like a balanced and nourishing diet? So, and I mean, one of the things I'm so grateful for in like working in this field is that I've gotten to work with so many dietitians over the years, and I've really learned like so much about the science of food, which has been like just so helpful for me personally. Mm-hmm. So learning like, okay, like a balanced meal is like a starch, a protein, and a fat, and then like a vegetable, right? And snacks are, maybe having like 2 food categories, right? So like a protein and a starch or something. And like within those categories, you can think like, okay, like if you see like no food's as good or bad, like how can I like build meals that are like nourishing, that like honor my cravings and that feel balanced, right? And it just kind of helps you to look at food in a new way of not being like, how can I like lose weight and not eat any carbs, but instead being like, how can I like fuel myself, right? And nourish myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of those things.
I've never thought about that as 2 separate, like your relationship with your body, and then there's your relationship with food. And you're absolutely right. I've never thought about them as being separate. That's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I think there's definitely overlap. But when I think about like, yeah, when I don't know, when I think about like, working with kids and stuff, those are definitely 2, they're definitely 2 categories kind of worth mentioning, and they kind of have their own things with them. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Kids hear, they're sponges. They hear everything and they're very observant. Very observant. So you're absolutely right. If you're saying, oh, I don't look good because I've gained weight or something like that versus, and I mean, it's natural to be like, oh, I put on a few pounds, so now I haven't been eating well, so I don't feel good. Like, I think that is a different shift. Yeah. I've noticed that in one of my cousins when she speaks, about herself. It's never in a negative sense. It's like, oh, I've had a lot of soda and candy and cookies. Maybe I need some vegetables because my stomach's not feeling right, or I don't feel well, or something like that, versus being like, ugh, I don't like the way I look in these pants or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's great because that's more about like her internal experience, rather than like objectifying herself externally, right? She's really looking at like how she feels, right? And like how she wants to fuel her body with nutrition. Yeah.
And I remember asking her about that because it was, I have friends with kids, but I don't have kids, so they're not in my day-to-day. So I found that interesting, and I remember asking her about it, and she's like, well, I want him to have a healthy relationship with food and not link eating healthy with how you look, but more so how you feel. So good foods may make you strong. Mm-hmm. They may make you have more energy. They may make you, you'll sleep better or something like that, or your tummy won't hurt or all of that. And so you're linking eating good foods but the same thing you said, whereas, snack foods and junk foods or chips or cookies or ice cream, that's not necessarily bad, but it's about balance to make sure that you feel your best.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love that.
So while we're talking about being all healthy and whatnot, so we know it's important to stay healthy during a time of devastating loss and grief, and really try to that is the time to take care of yourself, and to really be like, I always say, grief is selfish. Grief is very much a bitch. I say that a lot. And, but it's also the time to focus on yourself because this thing has happened to you. This devastating, traumatic thing has happened to you. So we've all felt grief. We've all lost a lot of people. We've lost, friends, partners, family members. When you experience a loss, and not even in death, I think we've all just personal hits in life, I think, because when you lose a job or an opportunity, that still counts as grief to me. That's still a loss. Mm-hmm. Something that you thought you would have or something that you had that you no longer do. And how do you stay healthy when you're experiencing loss? How do you keep yourself healthy and at the forefront? And how would you advise someone else to keep themselves healthy? It's like a double tier. question.
Yeah. Oh gosh. That's such a good question. I know it's well, and Shannon, I feel like, in some ways, I feel like you're more of an expert on this than me for sure with like the lived experience. But no, I mean, I think it's like you really just have to figure out like in whatever way you can. And like that might be a really small way, or that might involve like calling on other people for help, right? Of just how you're going to take care of yourself, right? Because it's like, even in the most like devastating of circumstances, like you have to eat something eventually, right? So how can you take care of yourself? And I mean, I've never had, I would say, the most intense grief I've been through is losing a grandparent, but it was in a very, I don't want to get into too many details, but it was in a really kind of devastating and unexpected way. Mm-hmm. And yeah. And I think it's natural to just be like in times of where you're upset or in shock. It's just like, you're typically not very hungry because like your body is in this like more fight or flight mode. Right. But still knowing like, okay, I have to eat something. Right. So how can I nourish my body? And you know what? It's like, sometimes that's just getting fed at all. Right. And this is what I used to tell myself when I was pregnant and didn't want to eat anything. It's like, eating something is better than nothing. Right. Mm-hmm. So kind of figuring out what that is, or figuring out like how you can help people or like let people take care of you. Right. Cause I don't know. I feel like sometimes people maybe want to support you, but like like you said, like don't know how. So maybe like if you could ask for specific things, that might be helpful. Yeah. I don't know, Shannon, I feel like you'd have really good insights on this too. Yeah.
I like what you said about people maybe not knowing how to support you, because I think that's the consensus, is that the will is there, the desire to support is there. And I'm very grateful for the friends that I do have, because I know I am prickly. I'm very prickly. And I also am very independent. And I also don't know how to ask for help. And I'm learning how to ask for help. I'm learning how to accept help from other people, accept just gifts. I was really weird about receiving things from other people. It made me feel like I owed them in some way. But I love to give gifts. I love to give gifts. I love to do things. Acts of service is my love language, but it was really difficult to receive. So that's something that I had to learn to work through. Was to allow people in and to take over and to just be like, they got me. So I think that you're absolutely right. Learning how to ask for help for sure, and actually asking for the help when you need it. But it's also safe to say a lot of people don't know what they need during this time. We hear a lot of, let me know if you need anything. And to give you, I'm going to give you a little shout out credit. So Alexis, we didn't talk about this before, but so Courtney actually went to college with Matt. So they were friends in college. Mm. And when we were planning his memorial service, it's okay. It's okay. Never apologize for tears. You don't apologize for that. We don't apologize for that. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you with that.
Sorry.
But I talk about loving through action. Yeah, I talk about loving through action. And one thing that she did, she reached out when we were planning the memorial service and was like, hey, because I didn't know what I needed. I was running around doing a lot. You were running around doing a lot, Alexis, fielding a lot of those phone calls. I didn't have my phone for like 3 weeks. I just kind of chucked it to the wind. And my mom decided, between my mom, Alexis, and my aunt, they just kind of decided who would actually get through to talk to me and who just kind of didn't, aside from the boys, obviously. But what Courtney did, she reached out and she's like, hey, my parents own a printing company. I'd love to take care of all of the programs for the memorial service. And they handled, and they're beautiful. I still have a couple of them. And they're beautiful. And like, but that was, to me, that's what I mean by loving through action. It wasn't like a, hey, if you need anything, let me know. It was like you looked at yourself, you're like, here's what I can do in this moment. Here's what I can do. Here's how I can help. I'm going to offer it. If you want it, great. If you don't, that's cool too. And that's what I mean when I say, that's a great example of what I mean when I say loving through action. Like, Alexis came down and just started walking my dog in the morning just so I didn't have to get up because I didn't really sleep. I didn't really sleep. And so when I did sleep, it was tequila induced. So I wasn't really sleeping. That was passing out. But it was just to take over the little things that I couldn't do myself or I didn't do myself. And so just making sure someone was always handing me something to eat, because I wouldn't, if I had to prepare it myself, I just wouldn't do it. Or someone would, like I said, walk the dog or like do my laundry, just little things that you don't think about. People really stepped in and really filled that void. And also on days when I just didn't want to be bothered, where I was just like, okay, I need like just 2 days of my house to myself. Can everyone just go home? And then you can come back. And it was, so that I really appreciated. But I think, sorry, I was trying not to burp in the mic. I think Alexis is laughing because this is not the first time that's happened.
No, but it's not, and it won't be the last.
I really do think I really just think that more people need to love through action, and they really need to look at themselves and say, okay, what resources do I have that may be useful to this person during this time? And it could be, if you have kids, taking the kids for 2 hours just so, mom can take a nap. Because that's the one thing I think about. I had the luxury to grieve. I say I had the luxury to grieve because there was no one else I had to care for. We didn't have kids. It was before our wedding. So, we didn't have any, we had combined households, but we hadn't started to combine all of the other things yet. And so it was just me, it was just me. And of course, his brothers and their now wives, were all we were kind of just very much this unit, and we really took care of each other. But I really had the luxury just to fall apart. And I'm grateful for that in a sense, because I know a lot of people have to just kind of shove down how they feel to care for their children who may have lost a parent and all of that. And so, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but loving through action, I think, is definitely one way to really show someone that you're there to support them. So thank you for that, because you really did that for me, and it still hits me right in the fifis.
Oh. Well, no, I'm so glad that was helpful for you guys, because and I remember thinking, on my end, being like, oh God, I just, you want to help, but you also don't want to intrude. So I think like you said, offering, but just having no expectations, right? Okay, if it's helpful, great. But if not, that's fine. So.
Yeah. So and I think that's especially hard when people are grieving, is they're trying to find their own balance, especially eating and maintaining just homeostasis in their normal life and keeping up things. And it makes me think, because you yourself were an athlete, and I think Shannon and I are both also very athletic, and we like to get moving. But when you're grieving, doing the things that you normally do just becomes so much more difficult. Well, Shannon,
I'm only laughing because I'm like, who is athletic? I'm not athletic. Who are you talking about?
You try. You're active-ish.
I'm active. But I'm not athletic.
She's active, but she's working on it. But anyways, it's hard for people when they're grieving to kind of find this balance between trying to stay active and moving their bodies and eating healthy. So what tips would you suggest for someone who is struggling to kind of find that balance at this time when they're, just having such a hard time pretty much just maintaining?
Yeah. No, I mean, I would just say give yourself all of the grace, right? And just do what feels good, and I think for some people that's going to be nothing, which is fine. And for some people, maybe it's going on walks or, I just think it depends on kind of who you are. I know for me, at my most stressed times, I need consistent movement. That's just kind of who I am. Otherwise I just get really stressed. I do it more for mental health than anything at this point. So, but I know that's not going to be the answer for everybody. So it kind of depends on who you are and what you need. Yeah.
Okay. I'm here to ask the tough question.
Listening to your body.
Ready?
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Get ready.
All right. If you could give advice using only one single word to someone who is deep in grief,
Ooh.
what would it be? Just one word.
That's hard. Grace. That's what I said earlier. No, but yeah,
Grace.
giving yourself grace. Yeah. It's like, this is not the time to have expectations of yourself, right? This is the time to survive and to take care of yourself. And that is pretty much it. Yeah.
That's a good word.
I love
think.
that.
Grace is a really
that was
good
my
word,
good.
because
That
at
was
the
my
time,
word. Survive.
Survive. Yeah. I don't know what I would choose, but
yeah. And I don't know. And again, so Shannon, I don't want to keep putting it back on you, but I'm wondering if, like, you know, because I think most of the grief I've had, I was like in the inner circle, but I was never like the most important person, right? That was probably like my mom or aunts or somebody. But I wonder, like, you know, if you're kind of in the inner circle or kind of like the closest person, like if there's this pressure to like grieve a certain way or like be presentable or like, I don't know. Like, because I can feel like if you have that expectation of yourself, I feel like that could make things harder too. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say yes. There's definitely a feeling of like, I think a lot of people who are grieving, when someone comes, because there was a lot of, oh, Shannon, I'm so sorry, a lot of hugging, and then they would start crying. And then it'd be like, okay, I want to do this right now. Okay, thanks though. But in terms of presenting yourself a certain way, I do think a lot of people feel that way. I didn't feel that way. I felt the urge and I resisted it. That's mostly because I just, as a person, don't give a fuck. Like very openly, I don't give a fuck. So your discomfort is your problem is kind of how I feel. And that's sort of how I've always moved through life. But like I remember, and I'm not going to say this person's name, but it was one of Matt's really good friends that like flew in for the service. And he's running up and he has tears, like just tears. And he's just like, shut it up. So I come from the hug. And I said, we are not doing this right now. Go over there. Go over there. Go pet the dog. Go for like, no, I have shit to do today. We are not doing this right now. Mm-hmm. And then I saw him like a couple hours later and I was like, okay, I can hug now. But which I think like, and for anyone who actually knows me knows that is just so not out of character. And like, he knew it wasn't a slight. It was just very much like, I have things to do. I can't keep crying every 15 minutes. Like, I get it. Yeah. But like, I have like 8 things on my to-do list today. Like that 8 big things that I have to go take care of. But like, I'm so happy you're here. Yeah. Can we cry at 7:45? Like, can we do that?
We'll circle back. Circle back for the cry.
We gotta run it back. And Alexis was good for that. Alexis, you and Elena were both like, no. Like, they're very much like bodyguards. It was like, she's not hugging yet.
Like bodyguard.
Like, no. Actually physically blocking people. Because I was like, hey, I just like, I need a break from people. And so maybe I'd go into at the time I was in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom. And I'd go into the back room and I'd be like, I just need a minute. And so, where's Shannon? And she's like, yeah, no, she's not seeing people right now. She needs a break. And they were just like, no, she needs a break.
Good for you, though.
And that's just what it is. Yeah. And sometimes it was my auntie, sometimes it was my uncle, sometimes it was like actual family. And they were like, sorry, you can try to go through me if you want. Mm-hmm. But so I really appreciated that. But I want to go back to Alexis. What do you think your one word would be? Because I know we have from Dr. Crisp, which is the coolest name ever, by the way. And your word is grace. My word was survival. Alexis, what is your word?
I think my word is patience. Because I think oftentimes when there's grief, people are in, and I love, but I hate those fucking 7 steps that people think, the first you're gonna, be depressed and all these things. And I think society has such a horrible view of what grief truly is and the motions that you go through. And there's no steps that are going to go in order and you're not going to move through it in order. And so I think just being patient with yourself and accepting eventually that you will get through it, but it's not going to be in a step mode, and it's going to be one day you're going to be, and it's not even day, it's minute by minute or second by second sometimes. 1 second you're happy, 1 second you're crying on the bathroom floor, 1 second you're angry, 1 second you know, it's just, it's really it's just all these things happening simultaneously. So just have patience with yourself and grace and survive. It's all you can do.
Yeah.
So Dr. Crisp, how do you want to be remembered?
Jeez.
One last hitter.
Man. Funny enough, that's actually a psych exercise. It's called 80th birthday party.
Ooh.
And
oh, really?
Yeah. It's like a therapy activity. Yeah. And you imagine you're at like your 80th birthday party, and like you think of like who you'd want to be there, and like the kinds of like people you'd want to be surrounded by, what you'd want them to say about you, things like that. But it's an activity to help
down. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to do this. 80th birthday
This might
party.
be a great exercise for our next event, Alexis. I love this.
I know. Okay, sorry, we interrupted you. Go on. I really want to know.
Okay. Yeah. But it's the point of it is to help you like identify your values, right? So like if you're feeling really stuck in life, or like you're having a hard time making decisions, it can be helpful to just be like, okay, well, what are my values in life? Like what kind of person do I want to be? Like what kind of things do I think are important, right? So like for me, so my values are like authenticity. So it's really important to me to just be as authentically me as I can, like in all spheres of life, like with work, with friends, everything. Adventure is really important to me. That's why I like to travel so much. Justice is really important to me. So I try to carry that through, like, you know, with all the different work I do. Mental and physical health. It's really important to me. That's 4, right? I have 7. That's all I can remember right now. So
I love
those
that.
are yeah. I don't know if I answered your question though. But
no, you answered the question pretty well.
No.
I'll take it.
Okay, good.
I will absolutely take it. And by the way,
I mean, your values are how you want to be remembered. Yeah.
She travels with a toddler.
I do like to travel. Yeah.
She takes that, which, by the way, the cutest baby in the world. Oh my God. Like, what a little nugget. He's so cute. But like travels internationally with this baby, and which inspirational. I'm like, look at her. She's a cool mom. But yeah.
Thanks.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, get a little refill, pay some bills, and we will be right back. This episode of Get Stiff is brought to you by Furwell Pets.
Losing a pet is hard. Not being greeted by happy barks or satisfied purrs after years of daily interactions can be devastating. Not really sure how to support someone who has experienced a pet loss? Furwell Pets gets it. Send them something to honor the memory of their pet. The Furwell My Friend Remembrance Bracelet is a subtle way to carry your pet's memory with you wherever you go.
Gemstone options include amethyst to support calm and rest, and tiger's eye to promote protection and clarity during this difficult time. Visit furwellpets.com to get yours today, or send one to comfort a friend. That's FURWELL pets.com. Furwell, my friend. Love lives on. And we are back with Dr. Courtney Crisp. We're going to continue on with a very fun thing that Alexis and I like to do from time to time. We just started doing this in season 2 for funsies, and we go on to the Reddit, which, you know, the pits of hell, and to see what the internet thinks. So
I don't know. Have you seen Divorced Birds of Reddit though? That's a great thread.
Divorced birds? No, but now I'm gonna.
Divorced
now
birds.
Now I kind of have to.
It's a really funny thread, or like Reddit thread, where they post pictures of like birds making like a weird expression, and they'll say something like, I don't even know how to explain these captions. It's like Stu regrets leaving his first wife for like his, I don't know, his second bird wife. They're funnier than that, but then
Oh,
You have to see it. It's
I'm
really
gonna have to bend. We're gonna go out down a rabbit hole. I know we are after this. All right. So, am I the asshole for bringing snacks to a funeral? I, 18 male, was recently mailed an invite to my grandma's funeral. She died 3 years ago, and only just recently were the funds for a funeral curated. The funeral was yesterday, and I brought a mini satchel with Baby Bell cheese wheels, yum, as well as a package of salami and pepperoni. Growing up, I've always been on the heavier side. No matter how much I dieted and exercised, nothing seemed to work out, and so it's led to somewhat of an eating disorder. My grandmother was Native American, and my grandpa, who was overseeing the entire funeral, is painfully white. Painfully white. It's in there twice.
Really?
My entire extended family had an index card with like 5 different handwritings on it, sent with every invite. There were rules that they wanted followed going through the ceremony. Mainly a lot of religious things, practices, mixing her tribe culture with Christian values, etc. But in one handwritten note I didn't recognize, it said, "No food or drink to be brought on the premises." I assumed that to mean rats were a big issue or something. I thought, if I just kept it all in my satchel, everything would be good. Maybe even go to a bathroom or something to not be seen. My older brother drove my sister and I 6 hours to get there, and it was a Christian church, something my grandmother would not have been happy with. She was cremated as she wished, but a picture of her was in a coffin. Casket. That's my only edit, just casket. I asked my aunt where the bathroom was, and she gladly showed me. I don't eat much. Eating big portions make me feel awful, and deciding when to eat is also an issue. I usually carry around small snacks with me for spur-of-the-moment I'm eating now decisions. And while in the bathroom, I hear a scoff and see my cousin's boyfriend. He's really upset that I hadn't followed the rules about eating on the property. I asked him if he made the rule, and he said my cousin wrote it because his sister, 23 female, was going to show up, and she's on a water diet, and it would be rude to have food around her. It's not like she'd ever go into the men's room, though. My cousin's upset with me for being dietist and ableist because she's on this diet due to her own eating disorder. She also never even showed up to the funeral. Am I the asshole?
That's quite the situation. Okay. I thought there'd be more nuance, but then that just got worse and worse.
No.
Yeah.
Did you not hear me when I said pits of hell?
You gotta eat. Yeah. Yeah. Was the premises like a funeral home or like I missed that part, or was it like a house?
So this is a memorial service for his grandmother that died 3 years ago, and they could just now afford to have the ceremony that they wanted to throw for her. She's not religious. She's Native American, but they threw it in this Christian church. They said no food. He needed a snack. He went to the bathroom and got cussed out by his cousin.
He whipped out the cheese, the wheels. Cheese.
Listen, Baby Bell cheeses are delicious.
I mean, in this case, you're clearly dealing with unreasonable people. I think if this was like more in the realm of like reasonable people, I might like ask why there's no food and be like, "Hey, I might get hungry. Like, is there somewhere I can eat?" I don't know. If they were like more reasonable, you know, you might. But I don't know. If they're that unreasonable, I say just eat the cheese.
So he's not the
cheese,
asshole.
Man.
I'm gonna say no. The family.
What do you think, Alexis?
Yeah.
No, I don't think he's the asshole. I would want to eat the cheese too.
I'm surprised he went into the bathroom to eat the cheese. I wouldn't have done that. I would have done like a,
yeah, I don't think he would have done that either.
I would have done a yawn snack.
I probably would have went outside into the parking lot or something. Yeah, I don't know hygienically if I'd eat in the bathroom, but I don't think he's an asshole.
He was trying
the consensus
to be polite. He was trying to
eat the cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Eat the cheese.
Well, this has been so much fun, and thank you so much for joining us and dropping your gems. And would you like to tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, no, thank you guys so much for having me. So I'm on Instagram at Dr. Courtney Crisp, so both C's, so COURTNEYCRISP as in Peter. And then I have a website, www.drcourtneycrisp.com. So I have all my writing there and therapy, so like prospective clients can look at that. And yeah, or I do speaking stuff too on eating disorders, body image. Yeah.
So it was wonderful having you. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys can follow me at I Do Death on Instagram and X, on TikTok as I.do.death. You can follow the show at Get Stiff Podcast.
And you can find me on everything at Death with Lex.
As always, this has been another episode of Get Stiff, Stiff Talk,
Stiff Drinks.
and we out, y'all.
Bye.
Bye! And done. Get Stiff is produced by Milan Reed. Do you love us and want to help others find the show? If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. For all audio platforms, please rate and review the show. It helps others find us, and we'd love to know what you think. Do you have a topic you want to hear us get into? A drink recipe you'd like to recommend? Do you have a story to share? We want to hear from you. Get in touch at getstiffpodcast@gmail.com or reach out on Instagram at getstiffpodcast.